Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I actually come onto the screen, guys, you need to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. When I was looking at the statistics on my YouTube channel studio, alhamdulillah, 70% of people who watch my videos haven't subscribed. Let's get this 70% up down. Let's get it down to about 50%, guys. So come on, guys, you need to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got a very interesting topic today, guys. The topic is, do you think Qatar is doing a good job in hosting the World Cup? I'm going to put the link in the chat, and it'd be great to get your views on that. Let me just put the link in the chat. Yeah, everybody's welcome. Join on, and I'd love to share your thoughts upon the World Cup so far. I really do think that the West, or the Western media, mainstream media, are kind of giving up on telling Qatar what to do when it comes to hosting or promoting their type of mentality. So yeah, guys, feel free to come on. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah, brother Shazad. Shazad, the link is in the chat. Feel free to come on, my brother. We're talking about Qatar. Do you think they're doing a good job in hosting the World Cup? And all the controversial, negative media, speaking bad about Qatar and so forth. What's your take on that? So yeah, to be honest, initially when I was watching all the build up to the World Cup, the mainstream media was so negative regarding how Qatar was running things and how firm they were upon their moral standards. And I think the tide is turning now, where the Western media, I don't think is kind of like focusing more on the football now. I really don't think that they're going to really continue with this, with their propaganda and their negative media kind of like palaver, like talking negative about Qatar. I think the tide is turning now, where they're focusing more on the football. And now when they're seeing the football stadiums, how amazingly built they are, and the lack of any violence and controversial drama taking place, with the supporters and the crowds, we know for a fact that if the World Cup was held in a European country or a different location other than the Arab world, that amongst the crowds there'll be so much fight, hooligan. Come on, we living in the UK, we know the dramas of the hooligans. We know how much they fight and how much trouble they cause. The other day, I was watching a clip on social media where two groups of fans, you got the English fans and the Welsh fans, having a brawl, having a fight, throwing chairs at each other, and how nasty that was. So, how do you think Qatar is doing so far in hosting the World Cup? The link is in the chat. Guys, feel free to come on, and love to get your thoughts on this. And somebody, even a non-Muslim, somebody who's not even a Muslim, what's your thoughts on how Qatar is running the World Cup? One thing I do see on the TV that is very family friendly, you've got a lot of, families in the crowd, young children, and everything seems to be very calm, very respectful. I've not seen or heard of any reports of any violence amongst the crowds. Everything seems to be really like in a nice, beautiful way. How football supporters should be. Guys, we're living here in the UK. We see the violence when, two groups of supporters, clash. We've seen the violence. We've seen people die. Do you know what I mean? Due to the behavior of the fans and the hooligans and the despicable actions of so-called supporters. So guys, how do you think the World Cup is playing up so far in Qatar? We've gone past the first stage of football. Okay, alhamdulillah. Hopefully we'll get some people joining soon, inshallah. So yeah, the link is in the chat. So yeah, guys, the link is in the chat. Feel free to come on. I just did a stream prior to this regarding hijama, cupping, and sports massage, and we had some very good questions from the audience regarding hijama, cupping. It's called. So today, and this stream, it's about Qatar, the World Cup. So I really want to hear your opinions. Even if you're a Muslim or you're a non-Muslim who's watching my YouTube channel, what's your take so far on the World Cup being held in Qatar? I initially thought watching the World Cup, especially on the mainstream media channels here in the UK, all the World Cup matches are free. You don't have to go on to some of the paid kind of membership channels. You can just watch it free on our basic channels here in the UK. And every time, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh, Shazad Hussein and Saiko. Brother, feel free to come on. The link is in the chat. It'd be great to get you on. Yeah, Brother Shazad, you made a very good point here. Very good point. This is quite controversial because BBC or this particular channel or network has been so negative regarding Qatar and the hosting of the World Cup in an Arab country, majority Muslim country, and I find it really despicable and absurd. It's like a no-brainer. It's like the next World Cup is going to be held in America and Canada, and are they going to object to that? Are these channels going to object to that? Are they going to take a knee? Just like a year ago, we had the Black Lives Matter movement. Are they going to are they going to talk about that? Okay, we got brother joining us right now. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, regarding the World Cup, as a tournament, I think that they've hosted it quite well. And the football itself, other than some games being boring, some of them have been actually quite exciting. It is quite exciting to see that so many teams going to the last match of the group stage, where you don't know how the group is going to end. I think it's only France, Brazil, and Portugal who are guaranteed who are through, and the rest is all up in the air. And I think that's quite exciting for the tournament.
Yeah, I think you made a very good point there, brother. I think that's taken some of the negativity away. Now they actually are talking about the football. Before they weren't really. Every time they start a match, they talk negative regarding Qatar and why have they hosted the World Cup, and it shouldn't be held in Qatar. And now we've gone through the third stages. We come through the third kind of matches coming up soon, the final games of the group stages, and now they're focusing a bit more on the football. And I can see the tide turning now, where they'll be focusing on the football more than the political side of the World Cup. Do you see that happening, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll still be some lingering comments here and there, but I think also there's been a few people putting their foot in the mouth regarding these kind of things. Um, for example, the BBC reporter who was confronted, as they would say, by Carlos Caceres of Iran, the coach, and him saying, "Have you thought about asking these kind of questions to Harry Kane?" And then other social media aspects of it, where you're talking about the England football kit being made by slave wage labor by those in Thailand, for example.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you have the incident with Jurgen Klinsmann recently saying about the Iranian culture, the US for editing the Iranian flag in a post, and just generally some other criticism. But I also say there's a lot of YouTube videos of actually fans within the country, and they're posting their own experience, and their own experience has been quite interesting. One of the major interesting points that I've found actually is the complaint about no alcohol hasn't been that big, that large with a lot of fans.
True.
The second thing was a lot of fans are saying this is a unique experience for them because in any other World Cup, all of the stadiums and all the matches would be far apart. So you'd be only able to go to one match at a time, and you have to experience that match, and then you have to spend your days planning to go to another city to do another match. Where in this case, because they're all closely located, that you could actually go watch one match an hour away. After that match, you just basically go to the next stadium, watch the next match, go to the next stadium, watch the match. You can watch 4 World Cup matches within a day. And a lot, Qatar has done
that's
a
a good point. It's a good point you made there, because I was actually watching one clip where one guy actually traveled. He watched actually 4 games in one day. He said that the network here, the rail network is so good and efficient, is that he actually physically went to 4 different stadiums in one day.
Yeah.
And he goes, it was amazing. And he goes, the spectacle, how the stadiums are made, they're very fan friendly. It's easy to get there. There's no hassle whatsoever.
Free transport as well.
Amazing, isn't it? And I was just thinking that the reason I did this stream straight away is because I've been reading the media and listening to the media and their hypocrisy, saying that Qatar is, we should boycott Qatar and all this kind of nonsense. And I'm thinking, who are we as English? Me being born here in the UK, I classify myself being a Muslim first. And
Brother, can I make a point about that?
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead. Yeah, of course you can.
This boycott, a lot of them are asking for a boycott or, doing the armbands, or getting the yellow cards. In my opinion, you look at Muhammad Ali, you look at a lot of these Muslim in the Middle East, or I think there was one person who refused to play an Israeli, and they knew that the consequences would be them having a 10-year ban from the sport, and they took the 10-year ban. Now you look at that kind of dedication to their morals, to their belief of what is right and wrong, and then you look at these footballers, these FA. I think it's Virgil van Dijk saying, "In my position, I cannot play with a yellow card." And you look at these and you think, if you really want to stand, to be honest, it's just me. All right. And I'm gonna say what I believe they should have done. If they were so against it, if they were willing to stand on their morals, they should have pulled out of the World Cup.
Absolutely. I actually think it's just all propaganda, brother. I actually think a lot of these so-called football stars, especially the UK-based ones, I think some of their advisors were saying, but just do it. So it looks like you give a damn in reality. But, so people could think that you actually do care. But when it really came down to it, they were like, wow, I might get a yellow card for it. No. It's just the hypocrisy of it all, brother. The double standards is just like, I think this is so apparent now from especially the England camp, that all the media was saying that they should boycott it, they should take the yellow card. You made a very good example of Muhammad Ali. He actually. Go on, brother. Go on, carry on.
If you look at Muhammad Ali, it's not just Muhammad Ali. There's a lot of people, a lot of Muslim Arabs who actually have taken, having to leave tournaments, for example, not to face an Israeli opponent. I'm just giving this as an example, that they actually put these guys are not rich. These guys are not making a lot of money. They have actually put their principles on the line and have suffered professionally in their career, in their sporting career. And I look at this, and I look at all these, and you can tell it's lip service. Some of the players may really care about it, but it's not to the extent where they are willing to actually make a stand. None of them are, even the English FA. And to be honest, the English FA has its own issues. Even I believe, all the corruption they talk about Qatar and Russia. Everybody was in on it. It wasn't just Qatar who was being the ones who were being corrupt. If you look into it, all the FAs that wanted to try to win, they were all doing something a bit, what we might say, a bit underhanded. But to be honest, this kind of thing, I've seen this kind of things in the business world, in my experience in different countries, where it's either I'll introduce you to someone, or I'll give you a favor, or I'll do something for you that can help you in one way. And it's not always direct money exchanging hands.
Absolutely.
When we talk about, like you look at the lobbying groups that happens in the UK or America, and these lobbying groups or supporters or give money to politicians.
Donations.
These are pretty much like another way of, like someone called it legalized bribery. So you look at all these kind of things. You look at all these. They legitimize certain ways of corruption where we accept it as the norm. But if you take a step back and you look at it, it's just another way of sidestepping the label, but you're doing the same thing in an indirect way. And as I said, a lot of these FAs, if they really cared about it, they would have actually, pulled out. Denmark, for example. Denmark, what frustrates me about some of these countries, like Denmark, for example, they want to make a big stand on these, but this is the same country that has been banning and objecting to people in headscarves, in some cases where they're not catering to students. I believe there was one incident a few years ago where the majority of students are Muslim. The parents wanted halal food to be served. They said no, the food will not be halal. All right, so they're selling pork, and so you're basically forced to eat food that could be contaminated with haram food. So these countries do not want to make allowances for other cultures, but they want to impose their way on other countries. I'll give it, it's been quite popular right now about polygamy, for example. They don't allow in the UK. You can't legally register two marriages with the government, but they want to enforce. They see that as immoral, but they want to enforce something that other cultures see as immoral onto those countries. There is I would say, a neo-colonialist imprint on these. If you look at how, have you heard of soft power, projecting soft power?
No, I don't, brother. No, I haven't.
Okay. You'll see a lot of this is actually accused of China by Western media, where China has been investing in Africa and poorer Asian countries in order to gain more influence. And you'll see recently that a lot more Chinese drama and Chinese movies are making it abroad, where, before it would be once in a while you see these kind of Chinese films. Unless like people are into those wushu or kung fu films that come out of China. So what, even Netflix, if you look at it, they're having a bit more Chinese shows going on. What China's been doing is pretty much taking an imprint of what Western nations have been doing. So you
Yeah.
look at the concentration camp in Xinjiang, for example. This is actually based off the influence on this is based off Guantanamo Bay. You look at the Hollywood, and you look how they project their movies and their certain aspects of right and wrong. I'll give you an example. Have you heard of that film Turning Red? It was aimed at kids.
No, brother, I hardly watch TV. You know what,
Yeah,
I live in the dark ages. I hardly ever watch TV. When I'm normally on my Twitter or something, I look out for some news feed. But apart from that, I'm not a movie person at all.
yeah.
Sorry, Afi.
I don't watch movies, but the reason why I say is if you look at Turning Red and you see these kind of tropes where in Hollywood where the children rebel against the parents, where they always listen to their friends and who get them into mischief and to get in trouble. They're always rebelling against their parents. And in most of these movies, it always turns out the parents is in the wrong and the child is in the right, and then the parent comes around to the child's way of thinking. But when you look at some of these, it is subtle. How do I say? These are very subtle ways of influence and propagating certain aspects and views that they want to imprint into younger children. And this is why we've got to be very careful with how we are exposed to it. I've lived in a few countries, and my own experience, I've lived in China for a few years, and I've seen how the education system imprints loyalty into their citizenships, into their citizen, to the government. Not just the nation. The nation and the government are seen as the one thing. So this imprint that happens, it starts at an early age. And once you've seen that in another country, when I came back to the UK, and I see this also happening in the UK, it's a bit more subtle, and you don't actually notice it. But once you've stepped away, you've looked at the outside and inside of something, you start to realize there's a lot of things that happen that we actually take for granted, that we will not know about until we are exposed to it in a more obvious way. You look at education here, you look at what's been going on, what's been pushed, you've got to be very careful. I mean, we've seen that video of, I think it was on 5 Pillars who uploaded the video of a certain activist going to school, talking to the sixth form and trying to change the religion into accepting something that is haram. There was pushback from the kids, and the kids were the one told to be in the wrong. And from the exchange what I've seen, it was very actually very amicable, and it was very it's very good to see that the youngsters know, and they were calling it out. It is wrong. You want to do what you want to do, you do it, but don't say it is acceptable in our religion. Don't try to change our religion. And this is something we're trying to see a bit more for pushback, and we're seeing it more from people who, and I think personally, and the reason why we are seeing it in the West, not in the Muslim countries so much, but in the West, is because we've been constantly bombarded, the Muslims that we are here, and we've been attacked. Our religion has been attacked from all angles, subtly, overtly. We've been attacked, and this attack is ongoing. It's, I believe, if you look at the Salman Rushdie incident with the Satanic Verse, the book that came out, there was someone who was talking about that, and they were saying a lot of the Muslims, whether they're Pakistani or Bangladeshi or whatnot, they were taking a lot of stuff that they would accept. They would accept being punched in the face, being spat at, and whatever. Okay, they say, "Oh, this is their country. We can't do anything." A lot of people may not understand it. Even my own father was attacked at one point, and most people wouldn't report it to the police. My dad did, but in this case, this is the situation back then. But when the book, Salman Rushdie's book, came out, it crossed the line that a lot of people would not. It was a line that they said, you can do a lot of things to me. You can say a lot of things about myself, my skin color, my country, my language. You can make fun of it, but this is a line you do not cross. And that's what happened. And since then, we've been attacked constantly. That was one of the first attacks that, we said that line can't be crossed, and we've been saying that ever since. We've had to, when 9/11 happened, some people went too meek, became too friendly, trying to say no. We are not like this, we're not like that. But from my years of experience, we don't decide our morality in Islam. That line, those are what we are supposed to do is by Islam. And we have to, if you really submit to God, if you submit, that's the key word. If you truly submit to God, your feelings in the end of the day don't matter. What is right is right, what is wrong. We have the verse that talks about, we may like something that is bad for us, and we may hate something that's good for us. A bit like cough medicine. It's disgusting. And raspberry Pepsi Max, if you had it, it tastes like cough medicine. It's horrible. But it's like that. You get me?
Yeah, I do, brother. It's very important. You said a lot, mashallah, and I'm trying to go through some of the statements that you mentioned. I definitely think that Islam or the Muslims is the last religion that is actually standing right now and willing, where people are willing to fight for it, die for it, and defend it. Every other religion, I think, is being broken down, is being watered down. So Islam, I think, to the, I'm not saying the West, because within the West is Muslims, so I can't say just the West. Or I would say to the non-Muslims, I think their hatred towards Islam is made more apparent regarding the World Cup that's being held in Qatar, and their destruction of Islam and the Muslims with all the wars and all the past wars is apparent to everybody. And alhamdulillah, Allah has protected the religion, and alhamdulillah, the Islam is still standing. And they've tried many methods, brother, like you even mentioned, like the media, like certain movies, certain advertisement. Brother Mustafa C has done some couple of podcasts with me regarding some movies. Brothers and sisters can refer back to them, where I've kind of watched them and I'll come thinking, you know what? Yeah, there is some type of plan going here. Definitely there is. So what you said there, mashallah, is very powerful, mashallah. So I mentioned previously the end game, but I really do want to go there right now. I want to hit that towards the end of today's show. But I think, alhamdulillah, I think the fact that the World Cup has been held in a rich Arab country, I think has showed the world that, alhamdulillah, what we've been told regarding the Muslims, that we're savages or we're just like, bloodthirsty people, or we oppress our women, I think has showed a different aspect of Islam by watching the World Cup. In the audience, you have sisters with hijabs on, you have sisters with niqabs on, you have families in the audience in their traditional clothes. And, so I think it has really showed the world what Islam is. What's your take on that, my brother?
I actually think it's overall, I think the negativity has actually died down. People are still negative towards it. There are some people who are going to be entrenched in their views. But I've seen a lot of pushback as well happening. Like there was a video clip of a woman complaining about being in the only woman's line. And then another lady who actually lived out there was saying that she's come back to America, but she misses those things. Where if she's a woman, she would be sent to the head of the line. If she's with kids, they'll get given ahead of the men.
Yeah, and that's right.
This is the respect that is afforded to the women and to the children there. and that's something that they miss. I saw this English. I saw a YouTube video of this English fan who's over there in Qatar. He uploads some videos now and then, every few days, I believe, and he's talked to a lady who was living there since Qatar, just before Qatar actually won the bid, and she's been living there since. And she said, the media has been absolutely horrendous, with the onslaught. Another key information that people want to look at is, the death of migrants, for example. There has been a stat which is 6,500 branded out, but and then I think the Qataris themselves say that figure is actually much lower, to 37. One of the key things that figure is not really, the high figure is not really broken down from what I've seen. I haven't actually gone into where they got the figure from. From what I've read, and it was from The Guardian, I believe, is that the figure was collected by the people going to the embassy and saying how many people died during this time. So it's a figure of migrants that have died in Qatar from the time that Qatar won the bid to now. Now, this kind of figure can be misleading unless you break it down. How did they die? Where did they die? Is the work related? Did they die due to the work or other reasons? Even something simple as a heart attack can be disputed whether it was work related or not. Was it because of over stress of the work, working in the heat, or was it because it was just their time to hit the hay? You get me? And it's to be honest, I would not believe either figures from Qatar or the 6,500 figures, because one figure seems very high to be just about working with the World Cup stadiums. The other figure is quite low, but it's very hard to tell which figure would be correct. From what I understand, though, from what I've seen, there are a lot of people who are enjoying themselves. There's a lot of migrants who are from, whether they're from the east or the west, enjoying themselves with the World Cup. One of the things that people don't realize is, when we talk about migrants, and this is a key thing, and I'm going to link back this to the England t-shirt. If people from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from the Philippines, for example, from Nepal, from India, if they were making good money there, they'll never need to come to Qatar. And if you look at how they work, you look at all these top clothes brands, those top clothes companies, you look at Nike, Adidas, they make their clothes and their shoes in these countries and others. They make it so they can pay the workers very little money in order to make the maximum profit. And if people actually cared, if the English FA actually cared, they wouldn't be doing a deal with Nike, who practically has slave wage labor in these countries such as Thailand, who make the football kit. So you can tell that, when because it's Qatar, they can overtly criticize it. But when it comes to one of their own, the criticism usually comes from other places, usually from more grassroots areas than from the top or from those who have links with the businesses. Another thing that was not mentioned is...
Can I say something, brother? I just want to cut you up here. In the 1940s, just after the Second World War, all the colonized so-called countries, the immigrants or migrants were brought over to the UK to work in the foundries due to the lack of male population because of the Second World War. And at that time, so many people from Pakistan, even West Indies, came over and worked in the foundries. There was no health and safety. There was no PPE. There's none of that. So I'd love to see the figures when it came to that, how many people actually died in that initial period. And plus, a lot of people died of asbestos. I don't know if you've heard of asbestos.
Yeah, I heard of asbestos.
And that will take a period of time because it affects your lungs, it affects your breathing. And so, you're slowly poisoned to death. So that's a very interesting figure that I would like to see. And this country, the UK, was built on the backs of immigrants and migrants, as we know. I'm a third generation of that. So I'm sorry, brother, I just want to add that to what you're saying because it's very important.
Yeah, no. I think the way they will excuse it is they'll say it was back then, we didn't know any better. And in some cases, like the case of asbestos, that may be the case. But, you know, if you look at a lot of countries that need to make that leap forward, they will have those things happening. It is where health and safety doesn't catches up afterwards. Even in the UK, the laws of health and safety is always after the fact. Something happens, then after the fact, they have to put it in. A lot of the stuff that's happened, even the warning on your coffee cup, the only reason why that's come about is because something happened for that warning to be there. It's not just because
that's because somebody sued McDonald's or sued because
I have looked into that story as well. And what people don't know about that is because it happened in America. That story where it was an elderly lady, she got coffee. The coffee was not just hot like we might normally have it, but it was scalding hot. It was at a temperature that, if you put it into your mouth to drink it, you would burn your mouth, and that spilled all over her. So she got I'm not sure, was it certain degrees of burns that she had to be hospitalized for it. So she, in that case, it wasn't just hot coffee. But that would be a bit sidetracking right now. What I'm trying to say is that health and safety is always, something happens, they catch up with it. Look at the case of the Grenfell fire. Those claddings were deemed safe at the time until the fire actually happened, and they had to raise the standard. The standard was at a low point, even though there was known causes of issues that could happen. If you look into that case, that's been a total whitewash. Everyone's been let off the hook. And I believe if that was to happen to, a higher class of people, so not higher class of people of a certain class in the UK and a certain group of people, it would be treated differently than it was, because most of the people were lower class of immigrant background. Many people don't know, who are outside the UK may not know that in the UK, it's not just the color of your skin, but there's also a class system. So you can hit, you get hit you get a hit of double whammy if you are of lower class and of a skin color, versus someone who's, what we say, I'm going to put air quotes, which always can't be seen, upper class. And these kind of things do play quite a dynamic in this country. I was going to make a point. I kind of got sidetracked.
Sorry, brother. The reason I mentioned the 1940s is because, due to the Second World War ending, and then, Great Britain, as it was known then, invited people to come over and encouraged people to come over because of the war, the shortage of work. I'm going to relate this something, and I'm going to come on this another topic, and this is a bit further on in the podcast. So in the 1970s, that's when immigration law was introduced. Like you mentioned, brother, 1971, it was introduced here. So people from migrants or immigrants, there was a law regarding them and working in the UK. It became tougher for immigrants to come over and migrants to come over and work here. In 1971, the law came into effect. Now, coming up to now, 2022, we have a huge issue with migrants coming over and immigrants coming over here in the UK. And it's just like a cycle that seems to be repeated, is where in the 1940s and early 70s, these countries were colonized and destroyed by the British. Now, in 2022, the people who are coming over to the UK, their countries have been demolished, destroyed by the West or the British and the Americans. And now they're coming over here. And I want to add something add to this. The situation with people picking strawberries and low incomes and low wages, the general public didn't want to do those jobs. So these Eastern Europeans are encouraged to come to the country and fulfill that workforce. Am I making sense, brothers and sisters? It seems to be like
Yeah.
a vicious circle. We got Brother Mustafa joining us now. Big mashallah. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mustafa.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. So everything's good, mashallah. Nice to have you on. We've got a very interesting topic, brother. Feel free to join in and share your thoughts.
Sorry, bro. I can't see the title. What's the topic discussion?
The initial the title of the topic, the title of the show, I should say, is "Has Qatar done a good job so far?" But we're talking about how they have dealt with all the negativity from the media, Western media hypocrisy regarding Qatar and why are they hosting the World Cup. We touched on that. Then we've touched on some of the migrants and the labor force and the workforce that established Qatar. But it's the hypocrisy because UK was built on the blood, the deaths of hundreds of people, and have we got any right to point fingers at anybody else? So yes, it's a mixture of various topics, brother. Feel free to jump in because I know you're very knowledgeable in this topic and the hypocrisy and some of the media, how they portray, the Arabs and the Muslims as savages and so forth. But I think the World Cup has exposed and said, no, Qatar and the Muslims, there's nothing negative. There's no hooligans. There's no fighting. Is totally opposite to what the media has portrayed the Muslims to be. Brother, feel free to jump in at any time.
Absolutely, bro. I mean, it all started off with the president of FIFA, Infantino, his name is, and he made comments about, this is the kettle calling the pot black in terms of the history of the the Western powers and what they did historically, and he made mention that they should apologize for their centuries of control of the countries that they dominated for centuries. So that obviously stung a bill. So all of a sudden, the whole setup, which is in place now, the Western media have now totally gone against FIFA. So at every juncture, particularly in reference to this World Cup, we're seeing very, very specifically a mass criticism of FIFA, a huge criticism of FIFA. And what they do, you see, and we've spoken about the methodology of the Dajjal system, is that they will, for example, Qatar, outlaws LGBTQ. So there's a massive commotion about that. But what the system then does do to, exemplify its point, or to make it appear that what the Qataris are doing is showing intolerance and inhumanity for people of a same-sex disposition. They then state something which is true, which is essentially that these football matches which are taking place are essentially, to a large degree, being played on the blood of migrant workers, people who come from Southeast Asia in particular, looking for jobs. So they come to these countries and they do, they help build the infrastructure of this football World Cup. So what's happened as a result? This is very, very clear. Migrant workers are treated woefully and very poorly by the Qatari authorities. So what they then do, the JAR system in place, it then shows them to be intolerant of migrants as well as LGBTQ, therefore legitimizing the mass criticism of Qatar. So one is totally justifiable in criticism of Qatar in terms of its human rights records on migrants. But then what it does to augment its actual policy, which is, the spread of LGBTQ, then it also shows that, look, how viciously they're treated as well, in relation to also women, how terribly women are being treated. So it then shows that, women are seen as second-class citizens in Qatar. But we've seen the very crafty, meticulous way I've observed in in these football matches in the World Cup. That we're seeing women who are acting as stewards. They're wearing headscarves and fully covered, but they're associating with males at the particular, whilst the games are taking place, and some are acting in particular the prominent positions, close association with males, and even mass spectators who are female watching men play football. So this, you're seeing the slow methodology that they are applying to break down these Islamic institutions. You see, slowly but meticulously. So this is the twofold method that they're applying. One, which is a fact of what Qatar has done historically in terms, doing historically in terms of its mistreatment of migrant workers, but then to show that it's terrible. Qatar is generally terrible because it also vilifies LGBTQ, and hence it gives it a pretext to ram down on the on Qatar, and obviously making Islam as well look poor in the process. But alhamdulillah, I mean, I am aware there are a lot of brothers who have actually gone out to Qatar in anticipation to do the dawah there. People who, most people who watch the dawah channels will be aware of. They have gone there for the purpose of dawah. So inshallah, they made their efforts be successful whilst they go there. But like I said, these are some of the keen observers of what they're up to. It's very much showing us how the building blocks are being made in terms of the coming of the Dajjal and the Dajjal system in general, and the relentless method in which the LGBTQ drive all the sports channels. I mean, the BBC usually showed the opening ceremony to the World Cup, which before the first match takes place, they have like an opening ceremony, and this has been an institution of the World Cup since it started. But in this occasion, BBC refused to show the opening ceremony of this World Cup in Qatar as a protest on its human rights records. I mean, that was unbelievable in itself that something like this can happen. And I think there was and I'll send you the link maybe on WhatsApp later. John Barnes appeared on a morning show on one of the TV stations, in which they were expecting him to endorse what mass media is saying in terms of his criticism of Qatar. But he made some excellent points to show the hypocrisy of the West in terms of its colonial past and seeking to impose their contradictory and their hypocritical views on the World Cup at present. So
I haven't seen that, brother. I haven't seen that clip. Put it in the private chat and maybe we can share it and we can view it together. John Barnes is a very famous football player. He played for England, of course. He's one of the Jamaican, I think, heritage. He talks about the racism he received when he started playing football here in the UK. Sometimes the people throw bananas on the football pitch or make monkey chants at him. So it just goes to show, my brother, and you mentioned some very valuable, mashallah, points. And if you holistically look at what you explained there very articulately, you hit some really deep topics, because what they are trying to pump into this World Cup in the negative means is what you said there, brother, the coming of the Antichrist. They are really desperate to show and to kind of promote that thought process. But I definitely think, brother, I just want to stop you two brothers, and I want to throw something very, very important. Is initially when Qatar refused to promote alcohol, by initially accepting that they are going to promote or advertise alcohol. And this, I think a day or 2 days before the World Cup was supposed to start, they said, no, they're not going to promote alcohol. Do you think that had a huge impact from the Western media, that they won't willing, because I'm sure it will be a multi-million-pound deal to promote alcohol, but the Qatari government said no, we're not going to have any alcohol. Do you think that really hit the West somewhere deep? Do you think that really offended them?
Yeah, I think actually what it is, there is obviously an Islamic institutions in place in even these oil-rich Arab Emirate states such as Qatar and so forth. But it's now there's a battle swing going on internally to, as they would deem it, come into the modern age and leave aside Islamic values. So they can't simply put pressure on Qatar, and Qatar will there and then say, okay, alcohol is allowed, and so they have to appease their general masses as well, you see, because then naturally the governments will then be subject to questioning by their people as to this. But what they do, they do it in a very esoteric way. So this understanding that alcohol will not be served. And look at the hypocrisy of what I'm about to say. Alcohol will not be served to the general crowds who enter the stadiums. However, corporate boxes within these stadiums, they can serve alcohol. That's a contradiction in term. At the same time, I've seen watching the football World Cup a few matches that the crowds are drinking alcohol. You can see people with pints of beer and guzzling it down. So that's a nonsensical point to make, that although they've said in general we're going to ban it, however, this ban is only done to a limited extent to appease the general masses, if you see what I mean, because they can't just simply allow this to all happen. But they are allowing, like I said, corporate boxes within these stadiums for people to drink alcohol. And there's set times where you can actually drink it, even within public domains as well, which is supposed to be illegal. But they do allow people who are non-Muslims to have their liquor or whatever they drink. So, but it's a stage by stage process that they have to do so. But as you said, the West are absolutely desperate that they just tear down the infrastructures of Islam within these countries, Qatar being one. And in order to do that, although the Qataris are in with them. I mean, Qatar, a very good interview yesterday, which I strongly suggest you watch, where Brother Abdullah Andalusi, he features on a YouTube discussion with Peter Thatchell, who is one of the heads of the LGBTQ movement, and one Iranian apostate, and they featured in a discussion in relation to Qatar's human rights.
I watched that. I watched that debate discussion. It was very interesting. I definitely recommend the brothers and sisters to watch it. It's funny because he was Sorry, Brother Sycord, you had something to say, brother?
No. I will come back. I'll jump in when I need to. You guys go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for that, brother. Appreciate that. He was pushing back. There was a so-called ex-Muslim woman on that show, and she was saying that the hijab and the burqa are forced upon the women, and she used some very foul terminologies to say that the women are like bags or something, like black bags or something. And he was pushing back and saying, listen, you're saying freedom of right. If the freedom to wear what they want to wear, if the Muslim women want to cover themselves, so why are you so upset about it for? Is there freedom? Is there a right to do that? But you rather have women, sit here, or the nudists. He made a very good point regarding the nudists. He's saying if a nudist feels like, to sit here naked on this stage, are you going to say they can't? Are you going to oppress their freedom of choice and their rights? Very interesting show that was, brother Mustafa. Sorry, brother, for cutting you off.
No, that's fine. It's an excellent point you've raised. And the other brother who's on the show, I mean, please feel free to come in if you need to. But I mean, in regards to that, another common idea being given is this implementation of enforcing the Western values, which are contrary to, in fact, the established values, but because of the esoteric system, which is, propelling itself in terms of the Dajjal system manifesting itself. What we need to also observe is that, with the LGBTQ issue in particular, and the fact that homosexuality is banned in these countries. Um, and the general understanding was given no one can even protest or no one can even speak about their identity, however that may be. And Peter Thatchell, who is like, I think, a head of an organization called Stone, which seeks to enforce human rights for LGBTQ types of people, he made mention that there's no opportunities to protest or to make public the rights of LGBTQ. However, this was the same individual who was allowed access into Qatar. This is before the World Cup, and you can see it on YouTube, in which he singularly, which like as a single protests when he gets to Qatar for LGBTQ rights, and nothing was said to him or done to him. So it just smells of total hypocrisy that on one hand they're claiming that LGBTQ people can't even their rights are not looked after and they cannot even protest. Yet this is the very same individual, one of the heads of this movement, who is in Qatar protesting against it. So what we're observing in general, you see, this is a slow attempt to put pressure on Qatar. You see, Qatar is quite self-reliant due to the fact it's an oil-rich state, but obviously it cares about its international reputation. So in order to facilitate that, you see, they're allowing things to occur, like this alcohol ban. It's not a real ban. It's just a ban by. It's just a notional ban. People are being served alcohol there. Or if you look at so many other facets, like women are fully interspersing with men. We're talking about Muslim women as well. In Qatar, Muslim women are fully interspersing with men during this World Cup as well. So it's a general method to break down the infrastructures, and they're doing that very meticulously, you see. And it's something that we all should be very much aware of. And like you said, if you can maybe post a link on the chat or in the audience to let them know that they should very much watch the recent discussion that Abdullah Andalusi has on YouTube with Peter Thatchell and this Iranian dissident who is now who is an apostate, and a very lively discussion taking place. But alhamdulillah, with Muslims, we've got all the answers to any objections that they may raise. But yeah, we have to be all very much aware that this relentless attempt to enforce their values upon this Muslim nation, it's very much for everybody to view.
MashaAllah, well said.
Enforcement always happens very, very slowly. It always takes time, and I say this because if you look at, for example, certain rights to a certain group of people, if you go back to the early 90s, around 80s, you can see slowly more rights are being given. Even the framework of marriage in the UK, for example, you had marriage, and now they allow civil partnership, for example. And the only difference between civil partnership and marriage is one is you are married, and one is you have all the relationship and everything has all the things of a marriage, but it's just not called a marriage. You see, these things start always very, very subtle and very slow. Regarding the aspect of alcohol, for example, from some of the videos I've seen of fans that have been making their own fan videos on YouTube, you can see quite a few of them. A lot of the time, most of the fans are adhering to the rules. They are, I would say, this World Cup is probably been the most well-behaved World Cup, in the sense that I think every other World Cup you've had some form of violence happening within the fans, and because the drinking is not out of control, it's a bit more controlled, where a lot of the fans, they've got their drinking areas they go to. Some of them, I would say quite a few, probably have snuck some drinks into the stadium. I've seen a picture of, I think it was two Polish fans with vodka in the stadium. So you can see that it's not really being enforced to the level as they make out. But I think this was always going to be the case where Qatar was not going to allow alcohol to that extent. And then the news of it, the way the media broke it is to show, oh, you can't trust these people.
we can't trust these people to keep the word. They said they're going to allow it. Now they said they're not going to allow it. There's this kind of element that's going on within the media. There's always a, like I was mentioning about the 6,500 figure before and the Qatari figure. When they quote the figure, the higher figure, it's always with certain words which give it a lot more authority, while the way they use the words around the Qatari figure is with a lot more skepticism. And you can see this portrayed in the language that they use in the media. We've had this with the BBC with the died and killed between Israeli and Palestinian conflict before. I would like to add with the migrants, let's be honest here, most of the British don't care about migrants. If they did, they wouldn't be up in arms against all the migrants crossing the Channel Sea. We've got, I think they called it, one of the politicians called it an invasion. You've also had recently a report come out where there was a boat with migrants. It was sinking, and it was I believe it was in French waters, where the French Coast Guards told the people at the boat, call the British. They called the British. The British said, "You're still in French waters. We can't do anything." And the British and the French police or coast, I think it was police at the time, police Coast Guards, or whatever they're called, they were passing this boat back and forth between who should go save them. Neither went to save them; they drowned. And there's been leaks of what the transcripts of the radio conversations that they had have come to light. So you can say that, and this has not been such a big news that it would have been if this was to happen by certain other nations if they were doing the same thing. So you can say that there isn't really a great care for migrants. If you look at the way the migrants are housed in certain hotels, for example, you can see it's generally left to fall apart. I was watching a video where the migrants have to become security guards of themselves in some places, where internally they have to, the work they can get is be a security guard, where they security guard fellow migrants. So this false outrage over the death of migrants that the media makes a lot out of, it's not out of sincerity. It's not out of outrage of how could this happen? Because if it was, we have a lot. We talk about the blood that's been spilt to host this World Cup in Qatar, but there's blood being spilt, or people drowning off the coast of the UK, off the coast of France, where literally. And I truly think that some of these politicians probably would be more happy with them drowning there and not having them come into this country where they have to deal with them than actually have them survive. I believe UK has put in some laws which make it much more difficult for someone to actually apply for asylum from another country, and they want to ship out these people to Rwanda, who, even by the government's own reports, has certain, civil rights abuses and other issues in the country. Now, I'm guessing that because, the government to deal with them, they say, oh, it's safe to go. But their own report says otherwise. So you can say that there is a feeling that if you are looking from the outside in, and from the inside out, that there is a kind of thing where we're supposed to care about migrants in certain situations, such as those who died building stadiums in Qatar, but we're supposed to feel attacked by migrants that are trying to come over to this country to work and live and have a better life. And I think in this case, people in Qatar could make a point where saying that, look, we actually allow them to come to this country and work, earn money, and then go home richer, where in your countries, you even let them in and you let them drown off your coast.
Wow, brother, you made some good points there, brother. Very good points. Brother Mustafa, go ahead, Akhi.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the brother's point. So, what this issue of the migrants, the only reason why it's been established is to show, like I said, I'm essentially repeating what I've already made mention. The actual agenda is the preparing of the LGBT, But in order to legitimize this amongst all the world's populace, naturally the world's populace is going to think, why such a drive to legitimize LGBTQ? Why such pressure on an Islamic country which has its own rules and regulations? But in order for them to then show to the world that this is intolerance on the part of Qataris, then they have to speak the truth in regards to one matter, which is an issue of migrant workers, their blood being spilt as a result of the burning up of this tournament, which is a legitimate point. But that's not the concern, as the brother made mention, due to the fact that migrants are treated abysmally, in the UK, in particularly foreign migrants who come over and often are deported, and they're often having to stay in detention camps once they cross the border from France or wherever they come from. Then, in this particular method, the whole issue at stake is not of migrant workers. That's just to legitimize the fact that they want to propel LGBTQ, and hence get the general populace to think along those lines that yes, indeed, Qatar is totally against human rights, whether it's for migrant workers or for LGBTQ. It's like playing the double game. It's a double-barreled game, but to implement the main policy, which is the propelling of LGBTQ within Qatar.
MashaAllah. I've got a question to put to both of you guys now, and I want you to briefly tell me your opinion on this. So, I know Qatar, of course, is not like 100% Sharia based country, but so far, what you've been watching through the media outlets, out of 10, 10 is really good, 0 is bad, of course. How bad or how good do you think Qatar has done so far in dealing with, listen to the question, in dealing with the Western media outlets? Brother Saiko, you go first.
That's an interesting question. To be honest, Qatar was always onto kind of the losing end of it, I believe. We're dealing with the media itself. They have their agenda. They will push their agenda. They're coming from a certain angle. So Qatar, especially since they won it, there was never going to be a positive, I would say, a positive reaction to whatever they do. I mean, the only positive they would have got was if they completely, what's the word? Capitulate. If they gave in to all demands of these Western nations, and so in this sense, generally in the media, I would say they've not actually fared very well. I would actually give it a low score, probably a 3 or 4. Outside of the media, if we were to take that, from what I'm seeing on YouTube from people, there is a lot more mix going on. On Twitter, on Facebook, you've got people supporting, people against, people, reacting to things that are happening. So in this day and age, it's not just what the mainstream media portrays, also what's going on the social media, because people push their own narratives. And when you look at Facebook posts and videos of people having their own experience, and then you see people who've actually lived in the country for some time and posting about their own experience, and you can see there's a wide variety of a range of opinions that's going across, and there seems to be a pushback in social media from the main media narrative. And in that sense, Qatar is actually doing much better than one might have expected. But if you're talking about the mainstream media, they've probably have not done well, and I don't think they would have been able to do much better anyway, considering what the motive was from the outset. One thing I would like to add is I think there was also a indignity when Qatar got the World Cup from many European nations, and I think that indignity of how can this small country, Middle Eastern, Arab, Muslim, small country with no footballing history, their quotes, no footballing history, no footballing heritage, no prospect of growing the game, get it when we could have had it in Europe, when we could have had it in England. Yeah. So there is that kind of other aspect of it that was always going to kind of be against Qatar, even if they were to acquiesce on a lot of demands made on them. Sorry if I've gone on too long.
That's fine, brother. I think you made some very valid points, and just to reiterate, whilst Brother Muhammad, I think you're just taking a little break. The whole emphasis on Qatar being awarded the World Cup and its negativity is generally been portrayed at. It's simply a attack against Islam. That's what it essentially is. You see, the values, the common values that the Islamic values that are held within the religion. They want to peel away at it. They want to make it become more secular, more able to be what they would deem as inclusive of all peoples and all methods of thinking, and hence take away the very pretext of a divinely given method of living. That's what it's all about. You see, there's no other remit to it. I'd slightly disagree with your point in regards to them being like jealous that it's gone to Qatar, because if you noted when the World Cup, I think the 2010 World Cup was held in South Africa, they were very much proposing that it should be held in South Africa, and they celebrated that as well to show the diversity of the game in general. But it's more so to, but the issue in Qatar particularly is just to really hammer home and vilify Islam. That's what it's all about in essence. There's no other pretext for it, because Islam is the only religion which is standing up to things such as LGBTQ. The Western countries have essentially just made it a course of living, or just made it a matter of fact of how people are, and just allowed it to spread in their societies. So they're now seeking to spread that worldwide. So and obviously the attempt will be to go into the Muslim countries in particular and spread that as well. So I think, generally speaking, Qatar, in some ways, it can impress maybe even critics as well, because and I think if you look at people in general who hold on to similar values, just say Muslims and Christians who hold on to the traditional values of as Allah has ordained, whether that was in the Old or New Testament and even in the Quran, I think people of a particular standing will appreciate the stance that Qatar has taken. I know there are people in, for example, Brazil and these Argentina and these countries which are quite predominantly Christian. They have been very impressed by the way that the Qatari position that has been taken against LGBTQ, for example. So I think there are, generally speaking, people out there who are impressed by them, but at the same time, the relentless drive being pushed forward for them to bend, and then for them to accept these secular values. But obviously that's going to be reaching a crescendo, and institutions such as the BBC and other media outlets which have an approach to vast audiences, you can see the way they're manipulating their minds in order for them to think as such. So generally speaking, I think it's 50-50 in terms of the negativity with them. In lots of ways it's been deemed as negative, but in lots of ways I think there's positives as well which can come up.
Yeah, mashallah, you guys really kind of like answered that question pretty good, Akhi. I really, Ikhwani, I really enjoy that. But I actually, my opinion, I think Qatar have done really well in rejecting some of the Western standards and values. As we know, if you want to become a citizen here in the UK, in Britain, you gotta like accept the core values of the British society. So I'm assuming that if we are gonna go to another country, we're gonna accept their values and standards. So, for example, which is a common example I always use. So, if I'm gonna come to Brother Mustafa's house for a visit, he's gonna say to me, Brother Muhammad, can you take your shoes off? before you come into the house. I've got to respect that. I've got to say, yeah, of course. I'm going to take my shoes off and go into his living room or whatever. So we got to have that kind of respect for other people's country and their values and their morals and their standards. Why do you think the West, especially the British media here, especially you mentioned BBC, brother, BBC, every time they've played at the beginning of a World Cup match, all they do is speak negative regarding Qatar and their values and standards. Do you think they're going to show the same courtesy now when the World Cup is going to be held in America and Canada in 4 years' time? Can you see the BBC say, "Oh, but the American, abuse the blacks and so forth, and we should make a political stand regarding that"? So this is my question to both of you brothers here now. Are they going to use the same standards to the Americans when the Americans hold the World Cup in 4 years' time?
I mean, you'd rather doubt it. You wouldn't expect, because obviously these countries are fully immersed within their secular values. So you can't anticipate any type of criticism of them, whatever their double standards or policies are. But you know that, as the famous cliche goes, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So they even accept that when you go into foreign lands, that you should abide and respect their laws. This is even an institution within, the West, in the UK in particular, based upon such a cliche. So, but the fact that it's an Islamic country which is holding on to that particular value, of not identifying or not accepting things such as LGBTQ activities, and it's not just Qatar which is doing it. There are other countries, even another country participating at the World Cup, a predominantly Christian country with a good, healthy Muslim minority in the form of Ghana. Going back into June last year, there were some LGBTQ activists who were trying to propel their agenda, and credit to the mainly led Ghanaian government. They banned such protests and imprisoned these people because of the filth that they were spreading. So, and they were met with an international outcry, to the extent that expat Ghanaians who are based in other countries in the world, they were holding rooms on social media in prominent positions and in prominent social media outlets to put pressure on the Ghanaian government to release these individuals and to allow them to spread what is their human rights of trying to spread LGBTQ. But they stood firm. So because essentially, you see, this is a very, very important point that we've spoken about in the past. This will be one of the precipices of the coming of the Dajjal system, contrary to what Allah has revealed. So we all know that LGBTQ is something that is, in Islam, it's a major sin to participate in such, physical activities in particular. And this is something that Christians can also really, resonate with. So I do think that, despite the agenda being pushed, that the more and more people are becoming more and more aware of it, the more there will be a determination to stand up to these values that they're seeking to impose upon to us, and trying to change our way of thinking, and basically speaking, just ignoring what divine commandments that they have been set in order for us to follow our desires and whims. And this will, as I said, be the setting before the coming of the Dajjal and the end time scenarios which will take place. And as you're aware, I've spoken about that in depth on this show on a number of occasions. So these are some of the points, bro, that we all need to be aware, and we can do our little bits by wherever we may be in the world as well, to unifying with people who have these common values and who share these common values. So in schools, for example, if you have children, we don't want our children to learn about same-sex education, and if you don't do anything about it, they will implement it and make sure that within a very short period of time, young primary school teachers, kids will be taught such education. Currently, same-sex education, which is referred to as RSE, relationship sex education in schools, is optional for young children. And then at the age of 12, you can choose whether or not that your child participates in such um, in such classes. But once they reach the age of 15, you don't have any say as a parent. But now they're seeking to bring the age down from 15 to 12, and then they'll bring it down from 12 to a primary school level. So if they implement these policies in schools and no parents stand up, or there's no governor meetings, and there's no outcry from the public in general, then it's just a matter of time before same-sex education is going to be rampantly taught throughout the whole country, in which you will then, as a parent, have no option to defer your child from attending such classes. So these are very, very important points for us as people. We may be thinking, if you're sitting in wherever you may be, just say here in the UK, that this doesn't affect us because this is happening in Qatar. The World Cup will be over in a few weeks, and then the circus will move on. But this is all, being propelled and accentuated in these countries, in the West, in the UK, and in the US, where they set about these policies. So, for example, same-sex education and so forth, this will then be spread throughout the world. So it's not that they're happy that it just spreads simply in their own countries. They will not rest until they spread these abnormalities throughout the world. And as we discussed in a previous show with Brother Muhammad, in countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are introducing now, rights for LGBTQ. They're passing a bill in a Muslim country like Pakistan. So you can see how it's spreading like a cancer spreading throughout the world, and the forces of darkness will not rest until every ungodly element is prevalent throughout the world.
Subhanallah.
Okay.
Brother
That's quite a long
Cycle,
answer.
last
Yeah.
words from you before we wrap it up. Do you want me to repeat
Yes.
my question, or are you?
No. So your
do
question
you-
was about if the US, Canada, and Mexico, who are hosting the next World Cup, will
Mm,
face the same level of criticism or about any of their misdeeds, as we should say, could say. There might be some here and there, but I doubt there will be anything of this intensity or this level. There might be some criticism of it being in free countries. I've actually not heard any criticism at this moment about it. But you got Qatar in a very small place, and then you go to Mexico, US, and Canada. And USA and Canada are not small countries. It's USA, Canada, Mexico will span literally a continent kind of space. Out of the free, Mexico might have a bit more negativity with what happens with the drug cartels and the police. Ironically, America is seen as quite a safe place despite the amount of gun violence. And Canada has their own issues with their natives and their history with their natives. I doubt these will be brought up by the BBC, or it will be made a big thing. There will be a lot more focus on the sport rather than what's happening around the sport, as is the case in this case. I do think that a lot of people who remember this World Cup will be pointing this out when the next World Cup comes about. But it will be drowned because time goes by. People do tend to forget a lot, or they will not be as upset sometimes, or put something on the forefront as they have done now. Brother Mustafa said that it is against Islam. When he said about the point about South Africa, my point was that it is a combination of certain things. When South Africa won it, there is South Africa, their country is ruled in the same kind of vein as Western countries, in that they are all liberal countries, and there is also a kind of guilt with what they have done in Africa, especially with apartheid in South Africa. There was pressure in the 2002 World Cup, especially in Korea, where they do eat dogs, for example. And to be honest, in Korea, dog was a delicacy, and it was due to their circumstances, but they were in wars and famine in the early 1900s and under the Japanese rule. So when they won the World Cup, the promotion of dog meat and dog food, not dog food, I should say, but dog dishes, I should say, dishes that were created with dog meat, was not promoted as openly. And now it is, for us, it's haram, so it's a good thing that it's being phased out for. But now you'll find that a lot of Koreans who were born after that, after the 2002 World Cup, rarely or never eat dog meat, and they find it disgusting. And this is actually something that's been imported into the country due to the influence of the World Cup. So while we're talking about, the World Cup right now, the thing is we have to see the effects of this World Cup in about 5, 10, 20 years' time and see how it's affected Qatar. And we might see that, this kind of affect, this criticism that came into Qatar, it can go two ways, where the country sees it as an attack on themselves and they kind of become a bit more bold in sticking up for what they believe is their right and their way of life, or they acquiesce and they become, I think in the long, they might think that we are in the wrong, and they might allow a lot of these kind of agendas to come in and dilute their culture, dilute their way of life, and take on more Western liberal aspects of the West into their society and kind of pretty much ruin it. So there is, there is the other aspect where I was mentioning that it was a Muslim country, it was an Arab country. It wasn't a country that, they're a very small country. There's a lot of angles of dislike of it coming to Qatar. And obviously it's a Muslim country who doesn't adhere culturally and religiously to their way of life, where, religion is just an afterthought. It's not, if you look at South Africa, as I was saying, they pretty much are aligned with the Western worldview. They just have no power or influence to actually make a difference. Japan and South Korea, a lot of people may not remember, but there was some, some people did not like it, that they had to win it. It was a joint bid. It was not really that popular back then with having joint bids either. But because of that, America, Mexico, and Canada are hosting it now. And I haven't heard much about, people talking about the size of the World Cup being, across 3 massive countries. One of those countries could have hosted the World Cup by itself. And it's also falls the other issues out of, the hosts have to be in the tournament. So that's 3 teams automatically in, where in the past it would be the host and the former previous world champions. Like you said, and maybe going on a bit too long, it might sound like waffling, but yeah, I don't think America or Canada will get as much scrutiny for anything as they have, as Qatar has with the World Cup.
First, I want to add one very quick point, brother Mohammed. That'll be very, very brief. And that is, we mustn't forget, there's a third country which will be hosting the World Cup, and that's Mexico as well. Now, as you're probably aware, Mexico have recently passed laws where in certain areas you're allowed to have sex in public. Will that be scrutinized at the next World Cup? I rather doubt it, because it will become the norm, which will be inculcated in their secular values. So that's something else to bear in mind.
Yeah. And I believe that law was passed because they just couldn't stop people doing it. The law was not harsh enough, or there was no larger consequences of it, or it wasn't just enforced, or just passed a law to allow that. So it just freed up the court or something like that.
Yeah, obviously that then leads to the question: will the Western media, will they be vociferous opponents of these particular actions? I rather doubt it.
Oh, I doubt it as well because there's been cases, I believe, in the Middle East. I'm not sure which country where people have been having intercourse on the beach and being arrested for that. And there's been upset in the media about, oh, why they're being arrested. This is going against their rights. So the Western media are already for something like that. They're not against it. They're just they're just against it when it happens in certain places where they can make a kind of moral outrage, such as a graveyard or in front of a school. But if you were to do it on a beach, they promote it. I mean, we have all three of us are British, and at one point or another, we probably came across the Sun newspaper. They promote these kind of things, and they're quite happy about these kind of things. But when they want to, pass a full outrage, they will do it when they feel like it. I don't think Mexico, I don't think they will get a backlash on this aspect. The only thing that you might get is safety and drugs. That might be a big thing, as Mexico being the third country. I think personally that they'll probably be the ones that could get out of the three the harshest treatment, rather than America and Canada. But I don't think it will be. When I say harsh, I mean they'll be treated a bit worse than the other two, but they won't be treated anywhere near as Qatar was. I don't think it will get to even how the criticism of Russia was, and that was quite mild in itself back in 2018.
Definitely. To be honest, when we talk about America, Canada, and Mexico, I'm still wondering where they're going to get the funds to host the World Cup due to the financial crisis that the world is going through. The Arab countries, of course, they've got the resources to do that. And recently, I read in the newspaper that Liverpool and Manchester United are up for sale, and some Arab countries are getting together to actually purchase both of these clubs. Huge clubs, Liverpool and Manchester United, as both of you are fully aware of. So that will be very interesting because we know the Arabs got a huge history of buying clubs here in Europe, especially for the likes of Man City, of course you're aware of, and then Newcastle, and many huge.
I believe the Qataris own Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they do. But yeah, they are being linked to them purchasing Liverpool and Manchester United, which are up for sale. So yeah, it's very interesting. Where will America get the funds to establish the World Cup in the next 4 years? Allah knows best, and especially with the war that's happening in Ukraine and Russia and so forth, I think that will have a big say in another couple of more years. I think Ukraine is on the blink of crisis when it comes to the power sources being cut for the population in the major cities. So that's another topic in itself, brothers and sisters. I'd like to thank our two panelists. It's been very interesting. I've learned a lot from both of you. And maybe in the future, we can do another topic of your choice. Just contact me and we can get a round table discussion. Jazakumullah khairan, akhi.
Barakallah fi, jazakallah for listening to speak, brother.
No, you're welcome. Both of you are welcome at any time, inshallah. Brother Saiko, thank you so much. Brother Mustafa C, thank you also very much for coming on and being part of this show. And all the brothers and sisters in the chat, thank you so much for being part of it. But guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Recently, I was looking at the figures. There's 70% of people who watch my YouTube clips and podcasts haven't yet subscribed. So guys, please hit the subscribe button, share it to your family and friends. So all you've got to do is go towards the icon, punch the icon. There you go. Look how easy it is, guys. Takes a few seconds. It's not rocket science, is it? If I can do it in my old age, I'm sure you guys, you young teenagers, can do it. So, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Once again, I'd like to thank the panelists for helping me out, making this podcast interesting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Well,